Welcome to the second panel of the 12th Symposium of Humanistic Buddhism on the lamp transmission record of Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing. Just a few reminders before we begin the second panel. The facilitator will begin with a 5-minute introduction. Each presenter will then have 15 minutes to present. You will see time reminders on signboard. Over on that side, there will be a signboard when you have 3 minutes left, and again when you only have 1 minute left. You will hear the sound of a bell. When the time is up, if you continue to speak, you will hear the sound of the bell every minute afterwards and gets louder. After all presenters have presented, we will open the floor for discussion. Online participants are welcome to use your chat function to type in your questions. If we are unable to get to your question, we will pass them to the presenters, and there will be time during the closing conversation tomorrow afternoon for our presenters to address your questions. Thank you for your cooperation. The topic of this second panel is Humanistic Buddhism in Academic Discourse. This topic is so popular that we have divided this panel into two parts. Let us welcome the facilitator of the first part of this panel, Professor Hsing, Dean of Graduate School at Curtin University, Malaysia. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Abbas Manker and all the Venerables, and especially the organizing committee for inviting me to this very significant and meaningful symposium. So let us not waste time, and let me begin with my brief introduction for the next 5 minutes. Right, next, please. So in this session, we're going to talk about humanistic Buddhism in academic discourse. So I would just like to give everybody a sense of reference about what is humanistic Buddhism in an academic discourse. So what is an academic discourse? It is the formal, objective style of communication used by scholars and students to build and share knowledge. It encompasses both the written and the spoken formats, such as research papers, lectures, debates, and is characterized by precise terminology, more importantly, critical thinking and structured argumentation. So in humanities and social sciences research, we can apply both the objectivity through scientific research, as well as relying on textual analysis, argumentation, and interpretation of ideas. Now, ultimately, what is the aim of us having this academic discourse? So I would believe that academic discourse outcomes ideally will include knowledge and actionable practices, leading to what I believe should be the massification of humanistic Buddhism permeating in the societies that we lived in. So in this session, there will be 4 papers. I believe one of our presenters will be presenting it online, but we have got three speakers here. So let me jump into the first speaker. The first paper, next one, please. Okay, so the next slide is on the the lamp transmission and new horizon of meaning, humanistic Buddhism as paradigm of global humanities by Stefania, Travagnin. And in this paper, I believe she will explore the new horizons of meaning of humanistic Buddhism as a paradigm for global humanism. I won't say too much about the parallels and the differences between global humanism and humanistic Buddhism, But I believe that, the humanistic Buddhism, with its foundation in the original intent of Buddha, promotes compassion, human dignity, encourages social responsibility, as well as supports personal growth. So we will now learn from Stefania the similarities, differences between humanistic Buddhism and global humanism, and we will let her enlighten us on how humanistic Buddhism can be the next paradigm for global humanism. So without further ado, do I invite her first, or do I go through every paper first? Yeah. And I think I can invite her first. I will come back and I will use my own slide. Yeah. Okay, let us now put our hands together and welcome Stefania. If you change to your slide.
He's looking for my PowerPoint. I have my assistant. His nickname is Koala.
Koala.
So when you hear Koala, he has to change slide. Well, I can. Yes. Well, I would like to start by thanking Venerable Travagnin for Guangshan and Tian Institute for having me here as my first time in Australia. It's also my first time in Nantian Institute. And I have to say that being here in this space, for me, was really a testimony of the contribution of Master Hsing to Buddhism, but I think to humanity in general, because when you go from the institute to the temple and you are in this space, you can hear, you can see, and you can feel integrations of cultures, respect of diversity, and also what I define an harmonious sharing of space with the natural environment. And it's so nice to have a landscape, the green, the trees as part of a temple. So for me, this is a Buddhist site. It's clearly a Buddhist site, but with a gentle and effective impact, also non-Buddhist world. And you can feel, you can experience a sort of transformation, purification, and management of the mind. And I use these terms because these are kind of key terms that you also find in the first two volumes of the Lam transmission. And I say this because, before Maria Margigi, we were talking about the dichotomy between the sacred and the ordinary and how we have to go beyond this dichotomy. And I think you can feel that in this space, going beyond that dichotomy, but also going beyond the dichotomy between fields of studies. We are talking here about academic discourse. And very often humanistic Buddhism is something that is studied within Buddhist studies, which is not wrong. But what I'm trying to do is to try to position humanistic Buddhism in other academic fields and see what kind of other contribution humanistic Buddhism can give. And this is a kind of thread of a presentation today. Also going back to what Joseph was saying before, how this is for practitioners, for laity, is for scholars, is for devotees, but is also for non-Buddhists. And that I think is very important to keep in mind. Koala? So in my view today, also the panel after this, we're going to hear different papers that also try to position humanistic Buddhism within the field of Buddhist studies and also the contribution of Master Hsing towards Buddhist studies. And I think this is important, needs to be continued, also to better understand, because also humanistic Buddhism is evolving, Buddhist studies is evolving. So the positioning within the field has to be discussed. But at this point in time, I think it would be also important to do what I call Buddhism and. So to relate Buddhism to other fields, include Buddhism in public debates where usually it's more or less absent. Yeah, and then I discovered that in recent works that I've been doing. So again, trying to use humanistic Buddhism to address the challenges of our day, which is a sentence that I think Joseph said before. So if we want to do that, we have to put Buddhism also in less comfortable zone and try to see how Buddhism can really help. That I also think is the point of humanistic Buddhism. So what I'm going to do today in line of that is to try to position in these large public debates, discussing how humanistic Buddhism could contribute or could be the essence of a new form of global humanism. a new form, a kind of ethical narrative that can be a background for creating something important, kind of life guidelines for the entire world. To more than today, more than like 10 years ago, you hear a lot about creating a global community, the concept of global citizenship. And it's very annoying when you read these works. I mean, lovely scholarship, but when you read it, you see all these relying on Western philosophy, Greek cosmopolitanism. So there is not so much understanding of what Asian tradition has to offer. And in my view, humanistic Buddhism, but even before Confucianism, if you like, had so much to say about being a citizen of the world. So my point is try to show how through, especially the kind of compendium that you have in these 2 volumes, but the work of Master Hsing-yun, how humanistic Buddhism could offer a form of global humanism, and if you like, a kind of new template also for building global citizenship. And this is a kind of research that I've been doing also involving other Taiwanese big Buddhist organizations and other Buddhist groups to see how Asian philosophy could actually contribute to that. Now you can change slide. Voila. Before going into that, as a kind of exercise that we can do to start, is to try to see, I mean, before deciding what I wanted to say today and also the topic, I went through the 2 volumes and it's really the depth and breadth of the 2 volumes can really show you how you can read humanistic Buddhism as Buddhism, because in these 2 volumes, you have a lot about systematization of history, the essence, the values, the Master Hsing-yun's interpretation of humanistic Buddhism. Let's say that humanistic Buddhism has been interpreted in different ways by different groups. So it's not a dogmatic term. There is a lot of history there. And what Master Hsing-yun has emphasized as key essence of humanistic Buddhism, this is something that you find especially in volume 1. But then there is a big part about applied Buddhism. And I'm going to use just 3, again, key expressions that I found recurrent in the 2 volumes: the idea of healing the mind, the idea of education, the concept of the importance of education. And also there was a very interesting chapter about charity that kind of resonates with research that I've been doing recently. What I also loved is in these first 2 volumes to have a section about the monastic community, because you have a master, you have a doctrine. You know, I have to speak to the devotees, but first of all, has to speak to the Sangha. And especially now, after the passing of a master, the Sangha is becoming really the living essence of Master Hsing-yun's interpretation of humanistic Buddhism. So now their role is more than before, more than ever important, and humanistic Buddhism will have to, the Foguanshan humanistic Buddhism, will have to prosper and evolve through the Sangha. So it's very important that at the beginning we do have that kind of systematization of humanistic Buddhist monastic community. So nuns and monks are really the living image and the label that of this movement. Connected to that, I also have something that I was thinking when I was reading and looking at the title, Lam transmission. Today, the first panel discuss a lot what is this, you know, the role of the meaning of Lam transmission when you are within Buddhist studies. And I think, Jack, you're going to say something about that later today. And I was, when I was reading, you know, but it's a transmission, and I think it is transmitting to who? And this kind of question that Joseph also asked. And of course, it's a transmission to the Sangha, first of all, because the Sangha is important. It's now, they are the essence of humanistic Buddhism, the Foguanshan humanistic Buddhism. It's a transmission to the laity, to the Buddhist laity. You have a number of this discussion and explanation about compassion, about practice, about the paramitas that really resonates with Buddhist practitioners. But I believe it's also a transmission to, again, to agencies, to groups that are not necessarily Buddhism, charity organization, groups that work on environmental protection. So all these should also read this compendium and read the works that are related to that and try to relate to humanistic Buddhism as an important key, a kind of ally in the big debates and works that we all have to do together, like you said. So in light of that, as I said, recently I've been doing lots of work about charity. And so I was trying to look at Master Xing-Yun's interpretation of charity. It looked a little bit different than here, but that's okay. The emphasis on compassion is not highlighted in yellow. So imagine that highlighted in yellow. But the rest is the same. Good. So when you read people like me that have been doing work on humanitarian action and sustainable development and looking at, the contribution of Buddhism, and you open all these, there is a huge literature about humanitarianism and also religious organization involved in humanitarianism. And you find lots of religious organizations, all of them coming from the global north, 90% Christian when it comes to religious organization. Then, of course, you have a non-religious organization. I remember before going to Africa, talking to a colleague of mine who has been doing lots of work on religious organizations in Africa and explaining, there are also temples. I was talking about also the ACC and G and Fogwansha. And said, but must be new. I said, no, not really new. I've been there forever. It's not really new. And so it was very interesting to see how I said, well, it's true. We always look at Global North association coming from the global north, and we think about, when we think about religious organization, we think about Christianity. We don't really think about other Asian tradition, and that's the problem. It's a kind of colonial thinking. The global north goes to help the global south. There is not the idea that something coming from the global south, even if it's global north, global south, it's a kind of weird distinction, but you know what I mean, coming from the global south, helping maybe also the global north. So that's a kind of, so let's flip our mind and try to think in a different way. And when you look at charity, there is a long tradition of religious charities in China, not just Buddhist, but also redemptive societies. If you look at the Qing era, the Republican era, you have plenty of that somehow come even before humanistic Buddhism. Lots of principles from Confucianism about social responsibilities somehow also speak about charity. And of course, Buddhism. So that we have also some scholarship, or a very interesting work about charity and Chinese religions, edited by Robert Weller, Julia Huang, Wu Keping, I think these three. And that they talk also about Buddhist organization in there. But this book is a kind of unique. We have this very interesting 2 volumes by André Laliberté about Buddhist philanthropy. And luckily, he's kind of bringing Buddhism into the conversation. Then you have a book about Buddhism as a social force in humanitarian help that has been by Jeffrey Semmel and Hiroko Kawanami, edited, I think, more than 10 years ago, but it's about Asia. So Buddhism somehow is confined to Asia. And that, I think, is a problem, because we do have, again, a long history in China. So what we should do with these academic studies, we should definitely try to include also this view. And I think Master Xing-Yun view on charity, I found it was very interesting. I had not paid attention to that up to a month ago when I received volumes. And he said something, but at the beginning I thought, and then I said, yeah, it makes sense. So I said, when you do charity, you help. But you are concerned about the poverty of the people. That should not be the entire concern. You have to think about the mind, healing the mind. So give it priority of healing the mind before even giving food to people. And I thought, is it correct? I said, yes, it makes sense, because it's a kind of long-term goal. If people have a healed mind, and it can also become sustainable. So always giving without healing the character is a kind of short-term result, but not long-term result. And somehow resonates with a lot of criticism that in the field of humanitarianism has been raised by people working on development studies, saying humanitarian action is a big obstacle to a long-term sustainability and sustainable development. But somehow, if you think about healing, I want to say the soul, because in Buddhism, you don't say that, but healing the character, that's a way to create a kind of long-term sustainability. And it's also a response to criticism about many organizations, not just religious, that are kind of doing humanitarianism without thinking on the long term. So for Master Hsing-yun, a way to solve that, the healing the mind, is education. Education has been key in Fogwanshan history. When you think about the big organization, transnational Buddhist groups that come from Taiwan, I think education and culture are the two keywords that are always associated with Fogwanshan, while maybe meditation is the one associated to Fagushan, and charity is the one associated to Tzu, and so on. But really education, starting university. I have 1 minute? Gosh. You don't have enough.
What are you? 3 minutes.
10 minutes. I can be very quick. I can manage. And then you're going to do Tintin in case. So education as a way to heal the character, heal the mind. And I think he was not, again, if you want to think academically, you cannot isolate Master Hsing-yun and Humanistic Buddhism from Fogwanshan from the rest of history of his global humanism. Voila. So in the past, we have figures like Venerable Tzu, but have been talking about Buddhism as an education and the role that the religious education could have to society as the utmost, the best education, because it's not just educated society with some spiritual guidelines. It's what also we were discussing over lunch. So that is also the aim of Humanistic Buddhism. Go ahead. But again, compassion, that's something that I won't be able to go into details, but I think this idea of formless compassion, the forgivings, the free good of deeds, but also this idea of this formless compassion as a passport for goodness. And at the same time, bringing the Dharma into public space, valuing social engagement. These are all expressions that comes from this volume. In doing that is also, go ahead, is also bringing Humanistic Buddhism as being socially responsible. So self-cultivation and personal responsibility. And he also, in these two volumes, we find this parallel between the constants of Confucianism and the Buddhist precepts. And here, I think in doing so, he's kind of emphasizing the importance of Confucian values, also part of Humanistic Buddhism. This is scholars like Yang Huinan have been writing about this for a long time. And if you go ahead, going back in the history of global humanism, you see people like Wan and Yang in the Republican era. That was one of the people reacting to the May 4th movement, say you should not just accepting blindly Western values. Why we don't go back to our Asian? We talk about Eastern values. Why we don't go back to certain teaching of Confucianism and Buddhism and combine? We do have a form of global humanism. Go ahead. So talk about education and culture that doesn't encourage individualism and exclusion, but the idea of interdependence, a non-dualistic worldview. And this is a way that you can have kind of comprising the old and the new, East and West. This was the kind of third model of education that he emphasized a lot. I elaborate on that in another paper. And he was also coming from something that happened a few years before him, another institute of Eastern culture. So this idea of going back to these two pillars of Asian traditions. I think Master Hsing-yun and his idea of Humanistic Buddhism and global humanism are part of that. I cannot have time to say voila. But between, there is also a figure like Tu Weiming, where Confucianists took a leading role. And he's the one talking about global humanism. He used this expression as coming especially from Confucianism, with the spiritual humanism, the critique of individualism, moving into an anthropocosmic view. He talked about different forms of self-cultivation, the need for social solidarity, spiritual depth, the need of dialogue among civilization. And that, I think, is a kind of very nice introduction. If you think about historically, from the Republican era to Weiming and to what we read in these two volumes. And what we find here, especially in my view, that your formless compassion is a nice way to create this kind of narrative of ethics, but it's not necessarily religious or not label, but can be very helpful, not just to the global South, but very, very helpful also to the global North. And it could be a new template for global citizenship. This idea of, global citizenship based on, there are lots of discussion about that, based on political or economical or environmental values. But you can have a global citizenship that is based on this form of global humanism. Then you have a global community that can be equal to humanistic Pure Land. And I can finish with one thing. Here, this is just quotation. Happy to share my PowerPoint with you all. Just some quotation from his Master Hsing Yun's idea of humanistic Buddhism as religion as a social force, important to create this kind of ethical narrative that can help the world to heal. And it goes back to something that Peter Clark said decades ago about reverse globalization. And it goes back to what I said before. Let's not think that it's just the West going to the East and helping, but let's think of globalization, something that could come from the East, could come from the global South, and could have some force to actually give contribution outside Buddhist studies in fields where it's not always looked at, but can really give this kind of ethical narrative that can help the world to heal and create a humanistic Pure Land or global community. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Stefania. I might have failed in my duty as the facilitator because I forgot to stop her when the time was
I don't
up.
stop. So.
No, because it was so, what I was going to say is that it's so illuminating. And so I like the concept of this reverse globalization and how humanistic Buddhism can become a template or blueprint for global humanism. And with all that, what we are going to look at will be something like linking it to sustainability, which is the talk of the whole world today. So I think more work should come from that space, but without further ado, I would like to now introduce our second speaker, none other than our Venerable Deng Fashi. And her topic is about doctrinal foundations of humanistic Buddhism, a textual analysis of Buddha, Dharma, and Buddha nature in the thought of Venerable Master Hsing Yun. Right. So in this paper, I think she's going to give us the textual analysis of Buddha Dharma and the Buddha nature, and she will probably present her arguments through these three interconnected concepts. And I believe her aim of the presentation is to demonstrate to us how Venerable Master Hsing Yun's thoughts offer a systematic human world framework grounded on Buddhist philosophy. So let us now welcome Venerable Deng.
Thank you. Thank you, Corporal. And thank you, the organizer, and good afternoon to all the scholars. So without further ado, I need to present my paper very fast because time flies. So the paper that I'm presenting today, as stated in the slide, the doctrinal foundation of humanistic Buddhism. This is a textual analysis of Buddha, Dharma, and Buddha nature in the thought of Venerable Master Hsing Yun. While humanistic Buddhism is often examined as an institution or social movement, this study turns instead to its doctrinal core. At the center of this inquiry stands Venerable Master Hsing Yun, whose thought provides the most systematic articulation of humanistic Buddhism, and for Guangshan, the institutional context in which his vision has flourished. Yet my focus is not organizational history, but the underlying ideas that shape this tradition. The arguments unfold through three interrelated concepts: Buddha, Dharma, and Buddha nature. When considered collectively, these form a coherent framework that situates the human world within a Buddhist vision of compassion, wisdom, and intrinsic value. In this presentation, I am to demonstrate how Venerable Master Hsing Yun's thought offer a systematic human world framework grounded in Buddhist philosophy. The present study situates itself within a well-established body of scholarship on humanistic Buddhism. Existing research has emphasized institutional development, global expansion, modes of social engagement, educational initiative, and contributions to civil society. Representatives sampled by all the scholars include the Chandler analysis of the Guangshan and Maxim's accounts of Taiwan's religious revival, and the broader discourse on Buddhist modernism, which provides the intellectual backdrops for much of this discussion. Against this prevailing orientation, this paper advanced a different line of inquiry. Rather than privileging organizational or sociological dimensions, it asks doctrinal questions. First, how are the foundations of humanistic Buddhism defined? Second, in what way does Venerable Master Hsing reinterpret the categories of Buddha, Dharma, and Buddha nature? Third, how do these reinterpretations generate the normative basis for ethic and social practice? The central argument is that Humanistic Buddhism should not be reduced to novelty or practicality. Instead, it is presented as doctrinally coherent, firmly anchored in traditional Buddhist thought, and simultaneously responsive to contemporary social realities. This dual orientation, continuity with tradition, and engagement with modernity marks its distinctive contribution to Buddhist society. The research design adopted in this study is qualitative textual analysis. The principal textual base is the light transmission record of Humanistic Buddhism, together with related writings of Venerable Master Hsing. These texts provide the doctrinal material through which Humanistic Buddhism articulates its foundation. At the center of analysis are three guiding research questions. First, how does Humanistic Buddhism define its doctrinal foundations? Second, in what way does Venerable Master Hsing reinterpret the categories of Buddha, Dharma, and Buddha nature? Third, how do these reinterpretations generate ethical and social implications? So each question is designed to connect doctrinal interpretation directly to the lived practice. Methodologically, the study proceeds in a structured sequence. First, close reading. It isolates significant doctrinal claims within the texture first, and thematic analysis then organizes these claims around the categories of Buddha, Dharma, and Buddha nature. Finally, conceptual analysis demonstrates how these categories interlock to form a coherent framework for Humanistic Buddhism. So this is the conceptual framework. Its central claim is that the categories of Buddha, Dharma, and Buddha nature are not discrete or isolated. Rather, they mutually reinforce one another to form a coherent doctrinal framework. We begin with the Buddha. In Venerable Master Hsing interpretation, the Buddha is not a distant figure, but an awakened teacher situated within the human world. This emphasis grounds Humanistic Buddhism in ordinary human life and affirms the relevance of awakening to everyday existence. Turning to the Dharma, the teachings are understood as faithful to core Buddhist principles, yet they must be interpreted contextually. In this way, the Dharma remains alive and responsive to the conditions of modern society, ensuring that doctrine is not static, but dynamically engaged. Finally, Buddha nature provides the ontological and ethical foundations because all beings possess the potential for Buddhahood. This doctrine affirms dignity, equality, respect, wisdom, and compassion. It is the basis upon which Humanistic Buddhism articulates its vision of ethical responsibility. When considered collectively, these three categories form an integrated framework. The Buddha offers the human world model, the Dharma supplies adaptable teaching, and the Buddha nature establish the ethical basis. In combinations, these sustain a movement that is both socially engaged and doctrinally grounded, and demonstrating that Humanistic Buddhism is not merely pragmatic, but systematically coherent. Now, let us recall the statement by Venerable Master Hsing. The Buddha was born and attained enlightenment and taught in the human world. This quotation summarizes Venerable Master Hsing in insistence that the Buddha belongs within ordinary human history rather than beyond it. The first interpretive point is historical presence. The Buddha is not portrayed solely as a remote or supernatural figure. He is understood as a teacher who lives among human beings, whose life and action unfold within the human world. From this follows the second point, accessible guidance. If the Buddha teaches within the human world, then his message is directed toward ordinary human conditions, relationships, responsibilities, and choices. Buddhist practice in this way is not confined to monastic or a transcendent context, but speaks directly to everyday life. The third point is everyday practice. Humanistic Buddhism built upon this understanding to argue that Buddhism should never be separated from human existence. Practice encompasses ethical conduct, social responsibility, and daily cultivation, thereby embedding Buddhism within the rhythm of ordinary life. The implication is decisive. This doctrinal framing justifies social engagement as an intrinsic dimension of Buddhist practice rather than as an external or secondary addition. In Venerable Master Hsing's interpretation, engagement with society is not optional but integral to the life meaning of the Buddhism. This slide extracts the potential concern that adoption of Buddhist teaching might imply a departure from tradition. The point here is that adoption within Humanistic Buddhism is framed as faithfulness rather than abandonment. The interpretive flow unfolds in 4 steps. First, Humanistic Buddhism asserts continuity with the Buddha's original teaching, grounding its authority in the canonical tradition. Second, it draws upon the Mahayana principle of upaya, or skillful means, to communicate doctrine in ways appropriate to audience and circumstances. Third, modern context, education, culture, social science, and public engagement are recognized as legitimate sites of practice, not marginal additions. Fourth, this process yields a living Dharma, one that remains vital and relevant within contemporary society. A key quotation anchored this point is, the Dharma must be adapted to the times and the needs of people. This statement exemplifies Venerable Master Hsing-yun's conviction that responsiveness is not delusion, but the very mood of faithfulness. The doctrinal logic is thus clarified. Contextual interpretation is framed as faithfulness through responsiveness. A teaching remains alive precisely when it can guide people in their actual conditions. In this way, Humanistic Buddhism demonstrates that adaptation is not a compromise, but a method of sustaining doctrinal integrity of the human world. This slide introduced Buddha natures as the ethical foundation of the previous argument. The doctrine affirmed that all sentient beings possess the potential to attain Buddhahood. And it is this claim that grounds Humanistic Buddhism ethical vision. Working through the matrix row by row, Buddha nature established dignity and respect, since every person is understood to embody intrinsic worth. Wisdom follows as cultivation is possible within ordinary life. Practice thus support moral discernment and ethical responsibility in society. Compassion emerges from the recognition of shared potential. If all beings possess Buddha nature, then care for others and social service are not optional but doctrinally mandated expression of Buddhist practice. The right side panel highlights the key philosophical function. Equality is not framed merely as a modern social preference. It is rooted in a Buddhist doctrinal claim about the nature and potential of beings. Connecting back to Humanistic Buddhism, this is why the movements emphasize on dignity, respect, cultivation, compassion, and service is not simply pragmatic or socially convenient. It is doctrinally meaningful, grounded the Buddha nature teaching that affirms the ethical and spiritual potential of all beings. The conclusion at once here is that Humanistic Buddhism represents both reinterpretation of traditional Buddhist thought and an intellectual development within modern Buddhism. The three doctrinal cuts can now be drawn together. First, the human-centered Buddha demonstrates why practice belongs within everyday human life. Second, the contextual Dharma illustrates how tradition can remain faithful while responding to contemporary needs. Third, Buddha nature provides the ethical foundation grounding dignity, equality, and compassion in Buddhist doctrine. The combined significance is clear. These doctrines collectively support the ethical and social orientation of Humanistic Buddhism. The movement is not reducible to institutional expansion or social service. It is more fundamentally an argument about how Buddhist doctrine should function in the human world. Looking forward, the next stage of research will examine how these doctrinal claims are embodied in the practice within the institution, educational program, cultural initiative, social services, and lived religious life in contemporary society. In conclusion, this research demonstrates that Humanistic Buddhism is a modern Buddhist movement whose practical engagement rests upon a coherent doctrinal foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yu Deng Fashi, for sharing with us the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Buddha nature. Now we will move on to the third speaker. I believe he will be presenting it online, and it is by Professor Shou-Jen. The topic of presentation is Beyond Orthodoxy-Position of the Lamb Transmission Record of Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing in Western academics. So let us put our hands together and welcome Shou-Jen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm in Los Angeles. Sorry for that, I cannot be there because last week doing my yard work, I hurt my back and I broke two ribs. So that's why it's very hard to take a flight. So that's why I canceled the flight.
I'll
Well,
try.
Anyone can hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
very well.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Venerable Jue and Abbot Manke invite me to participate this symposium. The first time I heard Venerable Jue, and she said, "Well, it's not. You don't need to provide a full paper. Just throw out some thought, and maybe we can discuss later." Okay. So that's why. Honestly, I didn't prepare a full paper. It's more like a kind of the methodological note when I see the thing, this panel, okay? Well, that is the old thing. Leveraging the land transmission record of Humanistic Buddhism, LTRHB by Venerable Master Hsing to further Humanistic Buddhism in academic discourse. So the first thing I see this thing, I just have I need to meditate on it, okay? And as a teaching faculty, quickly I found this LTRHB is a source. A source material is good for the student and for the researcher to further their study in either modern Buddhism or humanistic Buddhism in particularly, or even the Asian religion. But for a teaching faculty, I feel I feel liable to them. I need to tell them what this LTRHB is and what this LTRHB for. Okay. Especially, most importantly, I need to let them understand or at least accept this LTRHB as an educational source from learning contemporary Buddhism and develop their research proposal based on it. In another word, LTRHB embedded with an educational merit to further their study work. So that's I need to present to them. And secondly, I think I'm the scholar. I also need to present this work to my lovely but always skeptical colleague to see what the LTRHB is and what it's for. So for this kind of the frank, okay, I developed the following question. Ask myself, it's more like a 公案, okay? Maybe I need time to struggle with that, okay? So my first prompt is, what is the should-be identity or profile of LTRHB by Venerable Master Hsing? We are going to elaborate too in Western academia. So identity and the profile of this book. Secondly, how should I do as a so-called scholar to deploy LTRHB by Venerable Master Hsing within my own teaching and the research works in the context of Western academia? So actually, this my presentation is more like a kind of the methodological thought about how to present this work to the audience, and the audience is composed by Western academic people. So that is my starting point. The first thing catch my eye is the land transmission record. I just finished the course teaching the Chinese Chan Buddhism and Japanese Zen Buddhism, medieval period. So land transmission record actually is a very important source of the current scholar to study Chinese Chan Buddhism. Okay, so I know later the Professor Xuan-Yuan Cha and later Jack Cha, Professor Lek Cha, they will give more detail about the land transmission record. So I just give a very brief summary to give a context about what I'm thinking. Okay. So first of all, land transmission record recognized by Western academia is they are a Buddhist hagiographical genre in Chinese Chan tradition. like these monks or nuns with a few occasions who become abbots in their own right and cluster under their authorizing teacher. Each typical entry with a name header that offers a bare-bones biography sketch, an emulation of sermons and encounter dialogues or explanatory moments from one's teaching career. It indicates any significant individual in a Chan lineage is the inheritor of unbroken, direct, personal series of the links to Bodhidharma and the Shakyamuni Buddha, which can be traced back further to the historical Buddhas or past words. In other words, Western academy recognize the land transmission record in this kind of the feature. What's the contribution or function of the land transmission records recognized by Western scholars? This to alternatively indicate the master-disciple relationship that perpetuate the lineage consists of passing the lamp of the wisdom from one generation to the next. That is the catch, and Professor Chen just mentioned. Maybe we just focus on this character of the land transmission record. I agree with that. Also, Buddhist school champion the advantage of their own teachings as the orthodox understanding of Buddha's enlightenment and the method of attaining the same status of wisdom to the imperial court, high officials, and the literary figure. In other words, land transmission record, in the Western scholars' view, is the kind of the material, or even we call the tool, to have the patronage, to receive the patronage from the either the royal family or the literary person to support Chan Buddhism. And also various competing Chan masters, each with his own disciples and a method of teaching, strove to construct a history and a tradition of transmission for themselves. So actually, in this kind, the land transmission record, Western scholar is not considered they are a real historical fact, but they just see that is an intent, that is a motivation to make each lineage look better, okay, look austerity, okay, compared to the other tracks. So that is the function for this. So how they begin to study? To achieve the oral legitimacy on lineage transmission, Western scholarship is not necessarily historically reliable to reflect the Chan development after Ming-Tang dynasty, early 8th century. To frame knowledge in the context of religious and political needs of the Northern Song imperial era, and between 10th century and 12th century, when these Chan texts were largely produced. So they have political and regional needs to produce these texts, to provide a hermeneutical structure of doctrinal and of teaching methods, distinguished from many beloved anecdotes about Chan master and their dialogue encounter with these disciples. Normally we call records of the saying, 语录. Okay, that is a kind of the function that recognized by Western scholar. Now we turn our eye gaze to our land transmission records of Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing-Yun. 星云大师人间传间，人间佛教传真录. Okay, as the chapter saying and Professor Chen indicate, they have 10 major contributions of a Venerable Master Hsing-Yun has done to develop Humanistic Buddhism so far. It's composed by his record of saying and writings and the nonverbal communication pursued as a life model of an enlightened being. So actually, Master Hsing-Yun in this book, actually, we profile more like a living Buddha, express a new authority of defining Humanistic Buddhism in the 21st century, consisting what might be characterized as a kind of the neo-traditional orthodoxy. Structured comprehensively in the discussion of the LTRHB later as a teaching material in order for a rightful transmission. That is my reading for this book. Okay. So based on this, it's giving me a kind of the thought about how I present this work to my student and to my colleague. So that's why I say position of this book or this volume of the work in Western academia. So we have an alternative. Sure, we have an alternative. So it's based on how we present it. Okay. So the first alternative we can just say is a new canon of the Humanistic Buddhism. Can we say that? When we say it's a new canon, it means an authority corpus to match the new contents evolved from the recognized Buddhism in the West. It's also using the Chan faction. It means separate transmission outside canonical teaching based on Pali, Sanskrit, Tibetan, or Chinese source. Can we describe this work in this way? And a well-established doctrinal and religious instruction that is or will be officially accepted and considered authoritative by Asian Buddhist traditions or Buddhist community as a whole. Can we position this book in this way? So that's why we can just sort this to begin our discussion about how we profile this. Or second alternative, can we just say this book represents a native voice of a modernized Buddhism called Humanistic Buddhism, uttered by a traditional Asian Buddhist Sangha called Foguangshan Buddhist Order. So we particularize this book into a voice, but we will say it's a native voice. It's mean based on the Asian Sangha. Okay. To participate in the academic discussion on modern Buddhism in global scale, to serve as an open source of empirical thought and practice for scholarly review on modern Buddhist development originate from East Asian homeland. We can position this work in this way to win the Western scholar and the students' understanding and accept this work. Okay, so alternative for making teaching and the research material. That is my second question. We can just promote a canon complying source of reading to also authoritatively reason any claim related to the topic of modern Buddhism. Could we do that? It's more like a canon, just like we using Pali canon in the research work. No one suspect. Maybe someone will suspect, but based on the language, but the truth and the kind of the idea is a given, is assumed. Okay. But if we position this work in this way, we have to work on issue of well-agreed boundary of humanist Buddhism subject area. And also, we also have an issue of post-colonial construct of monastic-based Asian Buddhism. These two issues we have to solve. It's more like a condition. We present this work in this way. Or maybe we can just see a source or prompt to develop a researchable question for upholding a course teaching plan or research project. I will say maybe I will devote myself into this way. Okay, so maybe I can use this to develop a course syllabus or kind of the research project based on this. Or generally speaking, a contestable source or corpus for a comprehensive review of literature section within any research project. We can encourage the scholar or student using this work into their literature review, either to formulate the research question or formulate their theoretical framework. So maybe that is a way we promote, we leverage this work into academic discourse. Okay. So that is my presentation, and I hope my presentation is not very tedious, but I believe that is a kind of the methodological thinking about this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for presenting to us various approaches that scholars can use to look at the land transmission records of humanistic Buddhism in Western academia. So now let us welcome the fourth speaker, Professor Syuan-yuan. His topic of presentation will be From Lineage to Public Knowledge, Reconfiguring the Land Transmission Record of Humanistic Buddhism. Let us put our hands together and welcome Zhao.
This is not first page.
On the first page.
So I can first.
Hold on the table.
Okay. Okay.
These are all the mics are alive.
Okay. Thanks for Gongsan's invitation and Nantian's warming host. Actually, you know, I'm a little bit actually, I'm a sociologist and an expert on doing Indonesia Islam. But I just started a new part-time career, also doing study of Gongsan. And that's why when I was invited to be here, I'm thinking about what kind of thing I can contribute. Then I gradually feel that I can switch to a kind of knowledge of sociology, whatever. Second page. Okay. So I go to the library, I follow the Jingde Chuanden Lu. You know, I never do that in my whole life. And then after I compare the Jingde Chuanden Lu, I ask myself, why the genre is totally different and the Gongsan still stick to the title of Chuanden Lu. So it become a kind of puzzle for me and another kind of research questions. Okay, so in the beginning, I'm just thinking about this kind of transmission transition or compared to the traditional Chanzong Chuanden Lu, and to see how it is transferred into the modern form. But gradually, I find this idea doesn't really make sense. So I try to check a little bit, and I find out that actually there are so many kinds of genre of transmission in Chinese Buddhism. So I switch a little bit also to this kind of institutional selection regarding how Gongsan doing this kind of a decision to make this book. And then eventually I want to talk more about this kind of textual production and also public transmission. It's also my personal academic interest to share with my colleague in Taiwan. We are addressing terminology, we call it public Buddhism in Taiwan. Okay, so I consider this new Chuanden Lu is produced in such kind of a context. Next page. So then I try to reconfigure the land transmission record and from traditional lineage to modern public knowledge. As I said before, I give up to compare this kind of traditional genre of land transmission record and switch to recognize different genre and understand different way of organizing this kind of continuity. And also try to learn, in particular from this morning, I learned why Gongsan stick to land transmission title. and how it was become a continuity and public knowledge. Next page. Okay. Also, I benefit from Professor Chen Gonglam's papers, and I know that they are different genre of Buddhist transmission. At least here, you see in Chanzong Tiantai, Huayan or Luzong, they have different kind of core question and a different kind of knowledge form. It's really amazing, but I'm afraid that I am not able to understand everything. But whatever, it's so important to know actually what Fugangshan is doing now is not totally new, because in tradition, the Chinese Buddhists always create something new from time to time. But in this regard, Fugangshan is doing something new. It's inherit this new mission to create an alternative new genre of Chuandenlu. Okay, next page. So I decided to set down a 3 layer of analysis framework. The first layer is about the historical social conditions to create the new book. The second is about the Fugangshan itself, the institution reflexibility to organize this editing and publication. The third layer is about, since the book is published, it becomes a new genre and also become a public knowledge to expand its global and the social impact. Okay, but I emphasize that the 3 label is not linear. It could be interact with each other and also interact in different direction. And so anyway, it creates a new text of public life. Next page. Layer 1, historical social transformation. I think it's very important to understand why Fugangshan can create such a magnificent religious framework. It's important to understand the contribution of Taiwanese society and the Taiwanese democracy. Recently, I'm doing the charitable works of Fugangshan, and I just find out that even in Korea and Japan, the Buddhist organization in Korea and Japan, they can not do so many things like Fugangshan can do in Taiwan. It's really amazing. So because of that, this kind of modernization, globalization, and new formation of knowledge and media change, also institutional expansion, to create the new condition to trigger it, to publish the book. Although in Miaofan's article mentioned about it, the book is published just because of the passing of Venerable Master Hsing. But the most important thing is this kind of surrounding historical and social condition to push this new production. Next page. The second thing is about the institution reflexibility. In particular, 3 things is quite important. This kind of reflection is from monastic to social engagement. The second thing is that this collective transmission and the compilation push the publication become a kind of institution and editorial self-awareness. So you can see this kind of collective compilation in action actually invite the different kinds of people and collection and do something, contribute to the future. What kind of power to drive this? It's very interesting to ask the reason. Next page. Okay, eventually, a new general production and the textualization is produced. And we can find out that the traditional resources for constructing continuity nowadays has become a new editorial reconfiguration. it's just like the President Wu mentioned about, you can do systematic reading, you can do new theoretical organization, or do some new interpretation to thinking about the change for the future. Next page. Okay. It's interesting to ask. 佛光山人间宗教传灯录 has been published and entered to the public and religious life. So the book itself now has a new life. It becomes publicly readable. More people participate. Also becomes social and global circulation, and the more exhibition and reading. Now we can ask an interesting key point. What kind of religion continuity has been lasted and to be transformed? Because this is not only about publication, it's about a new life, a book entering a public religious life. Next page. So traditionally, this kind of different genre of Deng Lu always arguing about the lineage-based legitimacy, as mentioned by the Professor Deng. He talking about the traditional Buddhist monastic always able to make sure the legitimacy of the lineage. But nowadays, this is not the point. The point is to publicly organize this legitimacy, to allow the Buddhist knowledge shared by the public and integrate different aspects of society. So you can see this kind of impact extension have been distributed much more globally. So finally, in this presentation, I'm talking about a 3-layer. It's about historical condition, institution selection, and the general production. Eventually, the book is published. The book also gets a new life, especially public life, and also create with Fo-Gang-Shan, also with the more people get more religious legitimacy. Okay, finally, thank you for your listening and participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Zhao. And I believe now we open the floor for questions, right? Q&A. Anyone would like to put up the first hand and start the ball rolling, so to speak? Anyone, please? Or we can also have questions from the online attendees.
From here, I can do it. The content air card.
That's the question coming up. Question, Dr. Zhao. Do you think current academia in Taiwan or other worlds have the condition prepared to accept the new genre of land transmission records? Over to you, Associate Professor Dr. Zhao.
Yeah.
Definitely for you.
Okay. At least I can make sure it's really work for me. You know, because Xing Dashi is so amazing, also very difficult to understand him, comprehensive. I remember that one time, before I started the book project, I talked to Miao Dashi. I say, Miao Dashi, you should try to add some Xing Dashi movement. Because we are not able to learn from the beginning. And suddenly, this new Shuan is published. Oh, it's really helpful because I can in the beginning just focus on the chapter on the charity. So at least I can make sure that it's very good for academic research. It's very helpful. Thank you for your question.
I hope that answers your question. Any other questions for any of our speakers in this session, please? Yes, Jack.
Question was Stefania. Yeah.
No, I was trying to read because it was
Oh.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Because
You don't see my name there, so if I
yeah, because I learned so much about
I'm going to
that's
sit
the
nearer there.
thinking about so I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more good thing like secular humanists and also non-humanists can learn from this land transmission back.
Well, the land transmission is a compendium of whatever Master Syuan wrote, right? Originally, I thought it was a separate book, and then I realized it was not. It was kind of guiding, yeah. So I think it's you can talk about these 6 volumes, but you should also talk about the entire. So in general, I think this idea of formless compassion, I found this is what is something that can speak because doing good things, the idea of giving, the idea of harmony, so it doesn't really speak to a Buddhist audience only. So I think that can really relate to another form of more secular humanism. And I think secular humanism, when you talk about secular humanism in an Asian context, it's a little bit contested because the sacred secular are very much intertwined. So even if when you talk about Confucianism, you can think about this as secular humanism, but it's sacred at the same time. And I think it's global because, well, he's talking in the book, he also talks very much about religion as a powerful tool, but the need to talk to all the religions, the need to have a kind of comprehensive understanding and respect for the diversity of religion was also very interesting, the point on interreligious dialogue that he started. So I think start from looking at common basis and try to find an ethical base that is both secular and sacred. Compassion can be understood as a sacred as well as secular. It can define in a different way if it's secular. And that can really, in the same way that people from the Republican era, to Wei-Ming and now Humanistic Buddhism, I think that says it's something that can speak also to the Western world in a more comprehensive way. I think the Western world, when it talks about humanism, is very much Christian-based or non-religious based and looking at religion as a negative force. So when it comes to humanitarianism, there is this good and bad religion divide. So religion is bad because of what you may see in the West. So that you use religion as a way to proselytize your own religion. So religious organizations are there as with missionary tool and the missionary aim rather than just helping the others. That's one. And then you have religious conflict. So they look at religion as a negative thing. But religion can also see, and this is something that I see in Guangshan, I see in Ziji, I see in all the organization coming from the East, religion as an important social force because can speak to the soul of people. Let's call it soul, let's call it the inner character of people. So regardless of which religion you have, and this is also very clear here, all religion can work together as a kind of unified force to purify the mind. It talks about healing the mind, the management of mind. And I think this is something that can really speak to the world and can go beyond this dichotomy of good and bad religion.
Thank you very much. That's one question online that popped up first. If I may take that order. Yes, I will come back to you, yeah. So there is a question from the online. Generally, the LTR is written based on a perspective of an awakened being who basically promote Buddhism, suitable for human consumption and practice. Is the LTR meant for humanity at large, including Buddhist of other Orthodox traditions. So I think this question can be open to any of the speakers here who would like to answer the question. So I think we will get you. Not necessarily, and I feel that anyone can answer this question because it's a general question. I'm also so tempted to jump in to answer. So, but I'm not the speaker, so I would like to invite the speaker first. Professor Dr. Zhao, you want to go first?
Please.
No. Well, I think he speaks to all religions. I mean, let's be honest, in this room, I think some of us are not Buddhist, but we are all here discussing values and discussing in a way that it doesn't contradict with other tradition. So I don't think that for me, it's very difficult to think of this book as is a channel, is a door to many more books. So let's say Humanistic Buddhism and the Master Hsing's view, Humanistic Buddhism, as something only for Buddhists.
So, Yudong Pasha, you would like to say something?
Definitely, we have this perception because the book written by the monastic, written by the Fuguangshan. So this perception is this book actually is for the Buddhists only. But the content or the context in this book, we talk about compassion, loving kindness, and social service, and etc. So this is not limited to, I agree, not limited to the Buddhists, but it is for all human beings, right? Because if you are not the Buddhist or you as a human being, this is what we should do. Yeah, this is my view.
I think it's very difficult to talk about, at the time that we are now, we talk about globalization. It's a term that, you don't have it.
Global citizen.
Yeah, well, we are all diverse in one space. So if you can really have a successful message, if it doesn't address different cultures, let's say cultures rather than religions, because the term religion can have different connotations according to where we are in the world. But I think it would be not too smart to start the movement with some global ambition. And if you want to talk only to one tradition, if you can touch other people can convert to this tradition. But I don't think when I read the text, I see the need to teach the Dharma as a way to help everyone, but I don't see we want to convert people to Buddhism. That's something that I don't read that. But I found something that I found very characteristic when he was talking about charity. Yes, you can help the poor, but it's not just giving food. You have to heal the mind. At the beginning, I thought, poor people, they need, but then I realized what the kind of long-term goal. And I think that says everything about helping everyone through a kind of universal values.
Right. If I may jump in, I'm so eager to say here that yes, we forget about
I just follow the Professor training say, because we are not trying to convert anyone. I believe this book is an open source. And I believe everyone, just like Professor Chiou said, is a public knowledge. So it's more like when we talk about meditation, it's not mean convert the other people to non-meditator. So I believe this book we can position more like a public knowledge, as Professor Chiou saying, so everyone can benefit. You don't need to convert any your position from any we call orthodox tradition. But I will say, as a modern human being, at least we can say it's good to know, So maybe we can profile our book in this way. It's a good to know for the life, So that will be good. That is my opinion.
Yeah. So now, can I just say something? I think the Raymond, is that who asked the question? I think you have put it quite succinctly, because you say that is it suitable for human consumption and practice? If I may, I'm not from the monastic. As a layperson, I would definitely say that yes, it is meant for human consumption and practice. Why is that so? Simply because if you really read the Lamb transmission records, it's illuminating to find that the core beliefs and the philosophy behind it is to do the three goods and the four givings. If you distill it down to that general level, instead of looking at it as Buddhist thoughts, if you look at just humanity, compassion, that's really illuminating, and that can be applied to anybody, right? So it's saying good words, doing good deeds, and thinking good thoughts, giving people faith, giving people convenience, giving people joy, giving people hope. Yes. Do you know, my discipline is marketing. You know, in marketing, what do we used to say? What marketers sell, you tell me? Tell me.
Sizzle, not the steak.
No. Yes, that is good. But we always tell people that marketers always sell you hope. Why do you think females or women buy lipsticks? Because we want to look pretty. Come on. So in that sense, what I'm trying to drive home the point is that if you take it away and say that and you distill it down to the core values, I think it's highly relevant and applicable for human consumption. Every one of us in this world. And of course, you know, if I may add, if we connect it to the sustainability issue, I think that is something that is pointing to the way forward for us. Okay, thank you.
Ethical sustainability.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
But I think these questions, if I can interrupt you, I think these questions.
Questions. So one more question.
I think these questions are just for Buddhists or not. It's because we are used to categorize and to divide. We divide instead of unified. So I think it's our perception that lead to certain questions and certain thinking. But yes.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Question for Stefania is you talked about global citizenship and particularly the contribution that the East can make. In the past, it sort of seems like a Western concept, but it's the East can make great contribution. But I'm not sure whether that means it's very timely at the moment or actually has missed the wave, if you like. If you think of global citizenship in terms of Brexit or Trump or even our local politician in Australia thinking should go from multicultural to monocultural. So have we missed the wave, or is that something that's gone, or do you think that it's
No, because again, global citizenship, when I start studying this concept, we realize there are different ways to enter that. So what you're talking is more like a political lens for global citizenship. But I think what Fo Guangshan has shown in other religious organizations, but I would say Fo Guangshan as a Buddhist organization, being Buddhism a religion that is different than other religions. We are in Australia. This is not a Buddhist land. There are people from different nationality here as students or as visitors, and they all connect to each other. So for me, this is a kind of imagined community, if you want to call it. It's a kind of an invisible global community, but this is a global community. In this room, we are a global community. So I think there is already a clear sense of success of Buddhist messages based on this kind of intercultural values that go abroad and can communicate with other people, because it's beyond the differentiation of different religions. So you go beyond that. It's a kind of intercultural ethics that speak to everyone. And it's not just we miss the moment. It's already successful. The point is, other people should look at this. So look at the form of citizenship and community that is not based on politics. That, is a different level. You will always have distinct politics and political views, but as a human beings, we can connect in a different ways. It's a different form of global citizenship I was referring to.
All right. So in the essence of time, I would like to conclude this session because we must leave time for others. So practicing giving others convenience.
Can we put our hands together?
So let us. Oh, can I say that, please?
Can we?
So,
Yeah.
so can we put our hands together and give a loud applause to all of us? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Humanistic Buddhism. Sorry, for Symposium on Humanistic Buddhism on the Lamp Transmission Record of Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing. A few reminders before we begin the second panel. The facilitator will begin with a 5-minute introduction. Each presenter will have 15 minutes to present. You will see time reminders on signboards over there when you have 3 minutes left, and again when you have only 1 minute left. You will hear the sound of the bell when the time's up. If you continue to speak, you will hear the sound of the bell every minute afterwards. After all presenters have presented, we will open the floor for discussion. Online participants, you are welcome to use the chat function to type in your questions. If we are unable to get to your question, we will pass them to the presenters, and there will be time during the closing conversation tomorrow afternoon for our presenters to address your questions. Thank you for your cooperation. Now, the topic of the second panel is Humanistic Buddhism in Academic Discourse. Let us welcome the facilitator of the second part, Dr. Yu San, lecturer in Chinese Studies, University of Sydney. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to this session, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very honored to be invited by Venerable Chiou and Xiaoyan to be the facilitator for this session. I'm also feel very honored to introduce our 4 distinguished scholars and their presentations. Our first speaker is Associate Professor Jack Montan-Chia, who is Associate Professor in Buddhist Studies at the National University of Singapore, where he serves as an Assistant Dean of Research in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. He is a historian of religion with a focus on Buddhism and Chinese religions in Southeast Asia. Today, his topic is Transmitting the Lamp, Writing the Past, Light Transmission Records, and the Writings of Buddhist History. This presentation places lamp transmission records within the long history of Buddhist historiography. It begins with medieval Chan sources and extends to Venerable Master Xing-Yun's lamp transmission record of Humanistic Buddhism. It shows how transmission records function not merely as records of lineage, but also as powerful instruments for constructing memory, authority, and religious identity. It invites us to consider how Humanistic Buddhism reinterprets inherited forms of Buddhist historiography in the modern world. Should I continue with introducing other presenters, or okay? So now, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Professor Chen.
Auspicious greetings. Thank you, Hsing, for the generous introduction. I want to begin by thanking Venerable Mangke and Venerable Chiou for the invitation to participate in this symposium, and Xiaoyan for coordinating this meaningful gathering. As a historian of modern Buddhism, I should probably start with a small disclaimer. I am not a specialist in Imperial Chan texts, and I cannot confidently debate Song Dynasty lamp transmission records over tea with philologists. My training is instead in modern Chinese and Southeast Asian Buddhism, especially Buddhist modernism and transnational networks. Perhaps for that very reason, I found myself deeply fascinated by the lamp transmission record of Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing. Reading it as a historian, I became interested not only in its religious content, but also in how Buddhist communities construct memory, lineage, and history through texts. In many ways, this modern transmission record demonstrates not only the enduring vitality of the Lamb or light transmission records, 传灯录 tradition, but also how humanistic Buddhism continues to shape Buddhist historiography for the contemporary world. My presentation examines light transmission records as a significant genre of historical writing in the construction of Buddhist history from medieval Chan Buddhism to modern humanistic Buddhism. Beginning with the Song Dynasty compilations such as the Jingde record of the transmission of the land, which is Jingde 传灯录. By the way, this is a copy published by Fo Guangshan, and this is the vernacular Chinese or Baihua version of the Jingde 传灯录. And guess what? Venerable Master Hsing wrote the foreword of this, right? Yeah. So anyway, if you're interested to learn more about the Jingde 传灯录, do take a look at this. Right. So transmission records emerge as hagiographical works documenting the transmission of the Dharma from master to disciple. Beyond preserving lineage, these texts also function as important instruments for constructing religious legitimacy, institutional authority, and collective memory within Chan Buddhism. My presentation argues that transmission records are valuable historical sources because of their sectarian, textual, and constructed nature, offers insight into how Buddhist communities imagine lineage, authority, and historical memory. However, pre-modern Chinese transmission records emphasize patriarchal succession, monastic authority, and enlightenment narratives. Modern examples such as land transmission record of humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing reinterpret the genre in response to modernity and the rise of humanistic Buddhism. So my presentation is divided into three parts. First, I discuss light transmission record and the writing of Chan history. Second, I examine humanistic Buddhism and the modern transmission of the land. Third, inspired by Venerable Master Hsing's idea of the 300 years. So I want to invite us to imagine ourselves 300 years from now reading humanistic Buddhism through the lens of transmission record. I conclude that by expanding the meaning of transmission beyond lineage and encompass education, not yet, sorry. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Beyond lineage to encompass education, philanthropy, institutional development, cultural production, and transnational Buddhist networks. Then transmission record of humanistic Buddhism demonstrate the continuing evolution of Buddhist hagiography Buddhist historiography in the modern world. At the same time, it serves as an important source for future generations seeking to understand the history and development of humanistic Buddhism. Next slide, please. The metaphor of transmitting the lamb carried profound symbolic significance in Buddhist thought. The lamb represented the light of wisdom, expelling the darkness of ignorance, while the act of transmission symbolized the continuity of awakened insight across generations. Chan communities use this metaphor to articulate a vision of unbroken lineage stretching from Sakyamuni Buddha through the Indian patriarchs to Chinese Chan masters. From Song Dynasty onward, land or light transmission record 传灯录 became one of the most influential genres in the history of Chinese Buddhism. At one level, this text functioned as historical compilations documenting the transmission of enlightenment from master to disciple. At another, there were sophisticated historiographical projects that shaped collective memory, articulated religious orthodoxy, and established institutional legitimacy. Far from being neutral historical records, land transmission texts actively constructed the traditions they claim to preserve. Although modern scholars have often approached them cautiously because of their hagiographical tendencies and sectarian agendas, these texts remain indispensable historical records precisely because they reveal how Buddhist communities imagine themselves, narrated the past, and justify their authority. The next slide. The most famous example, which I mentioned earlier, was the Jingde record of the transmission of the land compiled between 1004 and 1007 under imperial patronage. The work standardized many of the textual, features now associated with Chan Buddhism: dramatic enlightenment encounters, paradoxical exchanges, witty dialogues, and recorded sayings or yulu emphasizing sudden awakening. Yet these texts were never simply collections of colorful accounts. They serve important institutional and political functions. Song Dynasty Chan developed alongside the expansion of state-sponsored public monasteries, and land records helped determine which lineages and teachings would be recognized as orthodox within these institutions. Inclusion in the transmission genealogy carried real significance. It validated a monastery standing, affirmed a master's legitimacy, and integrated local communities into broader networks of Buddhist authority. In this respect, land records function as ideological maps of the Chan world. Next slide. Scholarship on Chan Buddhism has fundamentally reshaped how historians approach land transmission records. Scholars such as Alan Coe, Bernard Faure, and John McRae have argued that Chan traditions invented themselves through textual production. From this perspective, transmission records are not transparent windows into Tang and Song Buddhism, but carefully constructed narratives that serve to establish legitimacy and shape collective memory. Such critiques are important. Many stories found in land records are clearly retrospective constructions. Genealogies frequently simplify or erase competing lineages. Chronologies are not always historically verifiable. The dramatic dialogues between masters and disciples sometimes reveal more about Song Dynasty ideals than about historical events themselves. Yet to dismiss this text as merely fictional or sectarian will miss their deeper historical significance. Their value lies not only in whether individual episodes are factually accurate, but in what the text reveal about Buddhist communities, institutions, and historical consciousness. In other words, these texts are historically significant not despite their constructed nature, but because of it. They reveal about how Buddhist history itself was produced. Transmission records therefore function not only as sources of memory, but also as important instruments in the making of religious history. Next slide. Seen from this perspective, Lam Transmission Record of Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing stands firmly within the long tradition of Buddhist transmission texts, while simultaneously transforming it for a contemporary audience. The work cautiously evokes symbolism and authority of earlier Lam records, yet its structure and purpose reflect the reality of modern global Buddhism rather than pre-modern Chan lineage. Compiled after Venerable Master Hsing's passing, the text systematically condenses more than 40 million words of the Master's teachings into a coherent framework organized around his 10 major contributions to humanistic Buddhism. Unlike Song Dynasty records, which focus primarily on patriarchal succession and enlightenment encounters, Master Hsing's record emphasizes institutional development, education, philanthropy, cultural production, and global Dharma propagation. Next slide. This transformation reflects a broader shift in the meaning of transmission. In classical Chan texts, Lam transmission referred primarily to the authentication of enlightenment through master-disciple lineage. In Master Hsing's work, the transmission becomes institutional, social, and global. The Dharma is transmitted not only through educational systems, charities, publications, museums, conferences, digital archives, and lay organizations. At the same time, Master Hsing's Lam transmission records retains important continuities with earlier traditions. Like Song Dynasty Lam records, it seeks to establish legitimacy and articulate orthodoxy. It presents Master Hsing's records presents humanistic Buddhism as the continuity of the Buddha's teaching adapted to the conditions of the modern society. The text emphasizes Master Hsing's role in systematizing humanistic Buddhist thought, modernizing Buddhist institutions, and expanding Buddhism internationally. The work also shares the commemorative and historical function of earlier Lam records. Just as Song Dynasty texts presented Chan Master as models of enlightenment, Master Hsing's record portrays Master Hsing as the embodiment of compassion, wisdom, and social engagement. Stories of institutional building, educational project, and global travel function not merely as biography, but as evidence of humanistic Buddhism in the modern age. However, the ideal Buddhist figure is no longer simply an enlightened Chan patriarch with mystical quality like in early Chan transmission record, but the humanistic institutional builder, educator, and global religious teacher for this human world. For scholars of modern Buddhism, Master Hsing's Lam transmission record is a significant historical source. It provides insights into the globalization of humanistic Buddhism and demonstrates how contemporary Buddhist communities continue to use historical writing to shape collective identity and preserve institutional memory. Next slide. I'm a historian, so I can't predict the future. But I love AI, by the way. So there's an AI-generated image. But I suspect that 300 years from now, and that is how I imagine 300 years from now, with robots helping with the Buddhist translation and teaching. So historian of Buddhism may sit somewhere in Australia, Taiwan, the United States, or even Singapore, reading Lam transmission record of humanistic Buddhism, just as scholars today read the Jingde Chuanden Lu. By then, the world of 20th and 21st century humanistic Buddhism may seem as distant to them as the world of Chan Buddhism in the Tang and Song dynasties appears to us today. Just as historians today recognize Song Dynasty Lam records as carefully constructed texts reflecting the institutional and ideological concerns of Chan Buddhism, future scholars will likely see Master Hsing's Lam transmission record as a mirror of modern Buddhist aspirations and interests. They may also note its emphasis on global outreach, interfaith dialogue, higher education, social engagement, and cultural production as defining features of Buddhism in the age of globalization. Ultimately, next slide. The enduring significance of Lam transmission records lies in the dual nature as both religious and historical texts. They preserve memory while shaping it. They transmit not only teachings, but also visions of the Buddhist past and future. From the Jingde Chuanden Lu to Master Hsing's Lam transmission record of humanistic Buddhism, the genre has continuously adapted to new institutional, intellectual, and cultural contexts while retaining the central concern with continuity and legacy. The Lam continues to be transmitted across generations, but each age reshapes the meaning of its life. And I will stop here, but I would like to show the final slide, showing the legacy of the Lam record. So with that, thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Professor Chia, for this insightful exploration of the contribution of Lam transmission record of humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Syuan-yuan in terms of its new meaning and significance in the modern world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Professor Ji-Zhang Yi, who is director of the Institute for Humanistic Buddhist Thought and Practice at the Trinity College, University of Toronto. He is a scholar of Buddhist studies, comparative philosophy and theology, and also cognitive science, recognized for his interdisciplinary approach to Buddhism. His research focuses on Chinese Chan Buddhism and its connections to Western philosophy and theology. Today, the topic of his presentation is "I'm Buddha, Lamp Transmission as Non-Dual Awakening in Humanistic Buddhism." This presentation approaches lamp transmission from a philosophical perspective, especially in terms of the notion of non-duality. And through a close reading of the metaphor of lamp and light, it asks a profound question: what exactly is transmitted? This presentation argues that transmission should be understood not as the transfer of a fixed doctrine, but as the awakening of non-dual insights embodied in ethical and communal life. Now, let's welcome Professor Yi.
Thank you for kind of introduction. Venerable Chiou, Venerable Guan, and colleagues, friends, good afternoon. So for my paper, I just ask a very simple question, as I said. So what is transmitted in lamp transmission? So we all know that this question, I think, lies at the heart of Humanistic Buddhism, especially in relation to lamp transmission record, but also about Chan Buddhism. So in Buddhist traditions, lamp transmission, as mentioned by Professor Chen Gongran this morning, it symbolizes the passing of awakening from a teacher or to a disciple. So we often speak of transmitting the Dharma, or transmitting wisdom, or transmitting enlightenment. But the question is, if enlightenment is not a thing or an object, or if wisdom cannot be possessed like an object, and then what exactly is being passed on? So this is my research question. So I think this question becomes especially interesting and important in the context of Venerable Master Hsing-yun's teaching, I am Buddha. So this statement may sound even controversial in some certain point. Is Master Hsing-yun claim that ordinary people are already Buddhas? Or is it that he teaching a particular doctrine about the Buddha nature? Or is something else happening? So today I argue that Master Hsing-yun's teaching can be understood through a central Chan principle found in the Platon Sutra. Because Dharma is non-duality. More specifically, I suggest that the metaphor, here's my thesis statement. So the metaphor of lamp and light provides the key to understanding both lamp transmission and the meaning of I am Buddha. So my thesis is very simple. So lamp transmission does not involve the transfer of a separate object or doctrine or enlightenment experience. Rather, it points to the realization of non-duality of lamp and the light, through which practitioners awaken to the inseparability of self and the Buddhahood in concrete human life. So this is my thesis statement. So to develop this argument, I will first examine Huinen's teaching on non-duality in the Platon Sutra. I will then show how the non-duality of lamp and the light unifies several major things in Chan thought, for example, wisdom and the meditation, and also the non-duality of substance and the function with the 定慧不二、体用不二 and the sudden and the gradual awakening. 顿见不二. So finally, I will suggest how Master Hsing-yun's teaching on I am Buddha reaccurates this Chan insight within Humanistic Buddhism. So let's begin with Huinen. So in the Platon Sutra, Huinen highlights and he challenges about dualistic thinking. So one of his most famous statements concern wisdom and meditation. And he saw, so you can, according to the Platon Sutra, Huinen's teaching of Dharma is based on his teaching about the non-duality of meditation and wisdom. Because by the time many people think the difference between meditation and wisdom, normally people will take wisdom come first, and then meditation often. Or some people will take meditation is more important. So we do meditation in order to gain wisdom. But for Huinan, no, this is not the right thing. Because for Huinan, from the non-duality point of view, meditation and the wisdom is alike. What do you mean by alike? In Chinese, we say 无二, non-duality, 不二. 不二 means 无差别. So it's a 心佛无差. So it's no distinction. But here's a very important condition for Huineng. He said, when you become enlightened, and then there's no distinction between wisdom and the meditation. But for the common people, they see the difference between the meditation and the wisdom. So people are different, but there's no distinction for Huineng or the meditation and the wisdom. So I think this is the point. And so for Huineng, so it's not a two. And for him, meditation and wisdom are not two. Wisdom is the substance of meditation, and the meditation is a function of wisdom. And then he take an example about the lamp, the relationship between lamp and the light. So we'll see. So he said, so we can distinguish lamp, the difference between lamp and the light conceptually, but we cannot separate them in reality. A lamp without light is not functioning as a lamp. And the light without sun source cannot appear. So lamp and the light arise together. So when we use exactly this logical, meditation is like the lamp and the wisdom is like the light. They are not two. They are not distinctly separated. This insight leads us to a second very important concept about the 体用words, or the non-duality of substance and function. We also can find the logical in this understanding about the non-duality of meditation and the wisdom of non-duality of lamp and the light. Go back to Zhongguang, the fundamental wisdom of the middle way, or the dependent origination or Syuan-yuan. Because of Syuan-yuan, so that's why we cannot separate lamp and the light. Because of Syuan-yuan, because of dependent origination, so there's no distinction between meditation and the wisdom. So this is a logical. We can go back there. But in Platon Sutra, not mentioned specifically at this point, but it help us to understand here. So again, so we see the metaphor of lamp and the light is helpful because the lamp may correspond to substance, while the light corresponds to function. That one cannot exist meaningfully apart from the other. So we never encounter a lamp that is completely separated from illumination. So likewise, we never encounter awakening apart from its concrete expression. This point is especially important to Humanistic Buddhism. Master Hsing emphasized that Buddhism must be practiced within human society, as a Renjian Forjiao. And compassion, service, education, and community are not secondary applications of enlightenment. They are expressed of enlightenment itself. The light is visible, but precisely because the lamp is present in the world. And then we could see another, the third issue concerning the famous Chan debate regarding sudden and the gradual awakening. The 顿见佛. Here I think many Western scholars also, they prefer or they will stress sudden enlightenment or sudden awakening over gradual awakening. So, and many modern scholars will argue that the Platon Sutra is not really written by Huineng, but by Shen Hui, or some historical study. And the reason why, because Shen Hui wanted to use Huineng as a case study to attack Shen Xiu, which is a northern Chan. But this is not the case at all. Because if you read the Platon Sutra very carefully, you will see Huineng said there's no distinction between gradual and in the setting, but the people are different. So this is a very, very important point. So he's not talking about we see there's a similarity between when we say the non-duality between gradual and the sudden, non-duality between the lamp and the light, or the non-duality between wisdom and the meditation. That's all the same. Because for Huineng, the main point we say 明心见性 or 视心见性 is to see clearly about your self-nature. This is the point. And why when we talking about when you say that when you saw two people in the temple, they argued from each other. So is that the flag moves or is it the wind moves? And when they say no, it's not that. It's not the wind that is moves, or it's not flag that moves, but it's that your mind is moving, that is moving. But at the point that people will say, what does it mean by man? Here it's very important when you read the Platon show very carefully. When you say the man, it's not the man in a universal concept. The man when you talking about is a 本心 or 本性. You will see the word is exactly the same. When you say the 本心 or original man or self-nature, 本性. And then we say 空性 or the Syuan-yuan. And also you say 空性, and also you mention about the 自性. Oh. All those things. He's mentioned the 佛性, the Buddha nature. So use a different language, but it's one thing. And when he's talking about the 不二性, exactly the same. So when you say 不二性, 空性, 自性, 本性, all the same, all one thing. So when you say 顿见自本性, which means to see clearly about your self-nature, which is Buddha nature. So that's why, from this point of view, you will see there's no distinction between wisdom and meditation. Why? Because your self-nature is Buddha nature. Buddha nature is Syuan-yuan. It's 空性. So this makes sense, logical. So in Chinese, classical Chinese, you will see 法无顿见，人有立顿，迷迹见劝，悟人顿修。是自本心，是见本性，不计原无差别，不悟即残劫轮回。So here's my translation. So in the Dharma, there is no sudden or gradual, but among people, some are king and the other do. Deluded recommended the gradual method, the enlightened practice, the sudden teaching. To understand the original man of yourself is to see into your own original nature. Once enlightened, you see, once enlightened, there's no, from the outset, no distinction between these two methods. Those who are not enlightened will see the difference. So here's the point. And when we, especially in academia, when the scholar to do the research about the meaning, the concept of non-duality or wisdom or meditation, people normally will take the scholar himself as an outsider. So you never understand. You have to put yourself into a subjectivity in Kierkegaard's term. Choose subjectivity. So I compare the two concepts. Kierkegaard chooses subjectivity in relation to, for instance, Dharma is non-duality. So you'll get a flash insight. So I think this so return to our original question. So what is really transmitted in lamp transmission? So it's not a doctrine, it's not an object, so but awakening to the non-duality of lamp and the light. So in relation, when Master Hsing-Yun's teaching, I am Buddha, so we'll see this is not a physical claim. It's a kind of, we say, like a 善巧方便 or skillful means or upaya. It's in Western philosophy or term, we say indirect communication. Because from like a Kierkegaard's point of view, or Western philosophy point of view, the knowledge about the ethical religious knowledge, which is have to the truth is essentially related to the person, the subject. So because the Buddha nature is inside is in relation to ourselves. Other people, a master teacher, a teacher cannot just tell you the truth, because that truth is not really, or even though you can tell what the Dharma is, but it's not really Dharma, because the Dharma is your Buddha nature. So you are only person who can realize the Buddha nature. And then this is another question, the non-duality between understanding and the realizing. But many people will focus on understanding, or some people just focus on realizing. But I think it's both very important, especially in Tibetan Buddhist tradition of Zhongke. I read a paper about the Zhongke and the Kyuga. He's very emphasized about the non-duality between philosophical reasoning and the meditation. So yeah, and then we will see, that's why when we focus about the Master Hsing talking about the I am Buddha, so on the perspective of Dharma is non-duality, we mentioned about the Yuanqi Zhongdao, depending on origination, the middle way. So I think this is very important thing. So let me conclude. So I have argued that the metabolic lamp and the light offers a powerful framework for understanding both Chan Buddhism and the Humanistic Buddhism. Based on Huinen's teaching that the Dharma is non-duality, we have seen the wisdom and the meditation, substance and the function, and the sudden and the gradual awakening are not opposing realities, but we say Bu'er is actually alike. Within this framework, we see lamp transformation cannot be understood as the transfer of an object or doctrine. So for Xing-Yun's I'm Buddha to carry such a transformative power. It invites practitioners not merely to believe a doctrine, but to awaken into the non-duality of self and the Buddhahood, and to embody that awakening within the world. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So as I have discussed already with Professor Yi, the notion of non-duality is very important in Chinese Buddhism, particularly in the Chan school, Huayan school, and also the 6th century Chinese Buddhist text, Da Sheng Qi Xin Lun, Awakening of Mahayana Faith. So I think to talk about lamp transmission record of humanistic Buddhism in terms of this notion, non-duality, 不二, or 启用不二, non-duality of reality and function is particularly meaningful. Thank you so much for this insightful discussion. Thank you. And now let's move to the next presentation. So our third speaker is Dr. Wei Xianqi, who is research fellow at the Institute of Sociology, Academia Sinica, Taiwan. His research fields and interests including sociology of religion, sociology of culture, sociology of arts, and sociological theory. Today, his presentation is Reflections on the Significance of the Work, Lamp Transmission Record of Humanistic Buddhism. This presentation examines both the significance of the text itself and the significance of its compilation. It explores how texts can preserve and represent charisma, and highlights the lamp transmission record of humanistic Buddhism by Master Xing-Yun as an important source of continuity beyond institutional structures alone. So we can see that our presentations move from history and philosophy to sociology now. So now let's welcome Dr. Qi.
Good afternoon, everyone. So at first, I want to thank the Venerable Wei Fa's invitation. Due to the invitation, so I have the opportunity to visit the Nantianshi that I since a long time want to visit. It's really a great honor for me to have the opportunity to share my some reflections on the lamp transmission records of humanistic Buddhism. So my presentation today consists of two parts. In the first part, I would like to give a brief review on the framework of the life transmission records at first, because some of you might not read the book set yet. So I think I will take 5 minutes to review that. And in the second part, I'm going to talk about the meaning of the text production itself. That is the significance of the book project. So let's begin with the first part. Next slide. Yes. In my view, the structural framework of a light transmission record is built up on 4 core discursive axes. They are respectively consist of the dichotomy, theory versus practice, Sangha versus laity, and culture versus Dharma. And the last one is a Buddhist tradition versus modern humanistic center. In Chinese, I say 现代人间道场. I want to emphasize that I don't need that the Xing Fa should emphasize the distinction, the dichotomy. But I think it's the framework for the compiling work. There's a structure of the book. So the next slide. The chapter 1 lays out the core theory of Xing-Yuan's Humanistic Buddhism, while the chapter 2 focuses on the dimension of practice. The first 2 chapters serve as a comprehensive overview of Master Xing-Yuan's Humanistic Buddhism. They complete Xing-Yuan's thought through the 2 fundamental aspects, and the basic ideas of these opening chapters pave the way for the entire book series. Next slide. And chapter 3 and 4 shifts the focus to the 2 distinctive pillars of practitioners who have kept the Dharma alive throughout history. They are monastics and lay people. By exploring the monastic orders, that means Sangha in chapter 3 and lay devotees, the laity in chapter 4, these 2 chapters address the vital areas where humanistic Buddhism must provide clear guidance. Within these 2 chapters, readers will discover Master Xing-Yuan's deep insights and real-world actions for both communities. He always tried to balance the dual dimensions of Sangha and laity. Next slide. Unlike the first 4 chapters, where each corresponds to a single clear axis, the subsequent chapters follow a different structure. Instead, each chapter represents the interweaving of the 2 other core axes. That means cultural Dharma and Buddhist tradition and modern Dharma centers. This is my reading. This is I don't know whether Chen Gongran, I know very well that he used also the hidden structure of the books, but this is my reading of the book set. Due to the time constraints, I would like to emphasize just 2 focal points from these remaining chapters. When we look at the development of humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan, Bo Guangshan stands out for its truly unique approach. The modern Buddhist movement views cultural traditions as a skillful means that guide people toward the Buddha Dharma. By promoting such a wide variety of cultural activities, Bo Guangshan naturally connects with people of all different backgrounds and personalities. This cultural dimension serves as a beautiful bridge, allowing the Dharma to seamlessly enter our everyday lives. I think we have also this issue in the panel 1 this morning that we talk about also the culture as a platform, right? And through this approach, the deep connection between Buddhist culture and traditional Chinese cultures take on profound meaning. This perfect blend of cultural elements and spiritual transmission is fully embodied in Xing-Yuan's proactive vision and his commitment to honoring and preserving the legacy of Chinese culture. And the second point I would like to highlight here is that even though Master Hsing-Yuan dedicated his entire life to developing modern form of Buddhism in the name of Humanistic Buddhism, he always chose to stay in an active dialogue with the Buddhist tradition. We see a clear example of this in chapter 5, which explores the master's system of doctrinal classification. It highlights the core philosophy in Chinese. We say 八宗兼弘, 禅净共修. That is the simultaneous practice of the 8 schools and the dual Hsing-Yuan's intention was about securing a firm stance within the Chinese Buddhist heritage. His thinking always balanced both dimensions, the modern way of Humanistic Buddhism on the one side, and the ancient Buddhist lineage on the other side. Even as he created a vibrant, modern humanistic way, he never forgot to anchor it firmly and deeply in the tradition of Buddhist history. Next slide. And so far, I gave a brief review of the content of this book set. Next, I would like to step outside the text and talk about what the text production means to Fo Guangshan and its devotees. The Professor Chiou is also a sociologist. We have the similar approach, but in a totally opposite direction. He deals with the impact of the book text on the community outside of Fo Guangshan. And what I'm talking about here is the meaning of the book set for the Fo Guangshan community. In the development of Chinese Buddhism, Grand Masters have always played a significant role. This is also true for Humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan, which actively targets the general public for Dharma propagation and has successfully established major monastic orders. This dynamic differs from the Christian groups, which heavily relies on organizational system as an alternative mechanism for routinization. Routinization is also a big issue, a proposition in the search of Catholics. Throughout the process of teachings and propagating the Dharma, Buddhist masters display a wise understanding, inspiring interpretation, and profound representation of the Buddha Dharma. These cherished, revealed elements. These cherished elements are the core factors that attract devotees, finding these appealing traits tightly to the master personality. And this is what academia terms a charismatic pattern of discipleship. The term charisma actually comes from the ancient Greek words charis, which originally means gratitude and thanks. And in this older sense, the word describes qualities that move people to feel deeply grateful. We see this exact dynamic in the relationship between the master and their devotees. The profound wisdom of the Dharma and the cultivation insights a master shares provide the vital life guidance that devotees need. To these followers, it feels like receiving priceless spiritual treasure, inspiring a deep, heartfelt gratitude. And this is and that make them want to follow the master's guidance and leadership. So this beautiful connection perfectly captures the original and true meaning of what academia calls charismatic leadership. For the vast number of Fo Guangshan's devotees, Master Hsing-Yuan was no doubt that kind of a grand master. This is someone who provides a true spiritual direction in life. So the deep devotion and gratitude of his followers grant him an irreplaceable position within the organization. But interestingly, for the Buddhist groups that build on this charismatic model, scholars raise a vital question. How does the organization endure after the leader passes away? Next slide. Of course, building an organized institution is a necessary step forward. However, structure alone is not enough to guarantee a long-term continuity. It still requires a deeper supporting force behind it. What that force can no longer come from the physical absent master, it must be substituted by representing his legacy. By using new methods to share the wisdom, teachings, and Dharma words he left behind, the organization can successfully represent Master Hsing-Yun's enduring charisma. So to me, and I believe to the entire Fo-Guang Science community, the creation of this book set is a perfect example of how we can represent Master Hsing-Yun's spirits and teachings. And this action carries profound social impact among devotees and followers. As the text itself serves as a living reflection on Hsing-Yun's spirit. In this post-Hsing-Yun's era, this effort to bring his presence back to us provides a crucial power that backs the organizational ongoing growth. So I feel this power deeply while attending the book launch in Fo-Guang Shan in Kaohsiung in 2025. And again, while flipping through the pages every time. So I'm certain that the same power resonates with many other devotees and readers. And in the future, I'm confident that followers will continue to find brilliant new ways to represent Hsing-Yun's legacy, creating a solid, lasting foundation for the future of Fo-Guang Shan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Qi, for highlighting the significance of long transmission record of humanistic Buddhism. So now our final speaker is Dr. Syuan-yuan, who is a researcher at the Humanistic Buddhism Center from Nantian Institute. Her research interests include humanistic Buddhism, transnational flow in Buddhist organizations, and modern applications of Buddhist teachings. Her topic is From Collective Cultivation to Community Building, a Humanistic Buddhist Perspective. This presentation turns our attention from text to lived experience, draws on oral histories from Nantian Temple and the framework provided by the lamp transmission record of humanistic Buddhism. It examines how collective cultivation and changing patterns of participation foster belonging and sustainable communities. It demonstrates how humanistic Buddhist ideals are realized through everyday practice and relationship. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Tan for her presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Yeah, this is the last presentation of the day, and so if I go over time, just let me know and I will stop. So the title of the presentation is From Collective Cultivation to Community Building, presented in a humanistic Buddhist perspective. And in the tradition of NTI, I would like to first acknowledge the country, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and also to pay my respect to elders, past, present, and emerging. I would also like to recognize the triple gem of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha that made up the lineage, philosophy, and community of Buddhism that the HBC has embraced to deepen our engagement, reflection, and scholarly investigation. So, will you be changing the slides? Oh, okay, thank you. Getting ahead of myself. But this is a picture for the tired eyes. That's our beautiful Nantian temple across the road, which was built in 1995. And as we know, the name Nantian means paradise of the south. And it was the largest Buddhist temple in the southern hemisphere at the time of its building. So, and it is one of the about 180 global temples of Guangshan around the world. The building of Nantian Temple is an exemplar of religious placemaking. And religious placemaking is a term that describes how religious groups create their own sacred space, religious institutions, organizations, support services, and transnational linkages. So Venerable Jerry and myself co-authored a paper looking at the building of Nantian Temple in volume 6 of our HB journal. And this is a continuation of that study and an attempt to leverage a concept from the Lamb transmission record on Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing to shed light on observations on the ground at Nantian Temple and its community. So I refer to the paper by Mazumdar on religious placemaking and community building in diaspora. If you could move forward to the next slide. So yeah, this story is about the people of Nantian Temple. And the next slide shows the paper that I'm referring to put some context into this presentation. So a disclaimer first, is not a comparison between different religions, but it is just that there are not a lot of papers on temple building in the literature. But in this paper, Mazumdar raised a very interesting concept that in the process of recreating significant places in a new setting, in this case, by a diasporic Hindu community in Southern California, it was also simultaneously a process of community building. It does not only express the group's religious identity, but it also transformed the temple from just a place of worship to a multi-purpose social cultural hub. And I guess for the audience who are very familiar with Guangshan and BRIA, just hearing this makes us think that there are a lot of similarities between what happened in this diasporic Hindu community and what happens with a lot of Guangshan temples around the world. However, there are also differences. I'm not sure if it is unique to Guangshan or not, but we recognize that in the process of building the temple, we notice that as insider, outsider, we notice that there are a few probably differences. So first, the Guangshan community is not a closed community. It is, on one hand, trying to help the diasporic community to settle down in their new destination country. But on the other hand, it also takes a missionary approach to try to bring humanistic Buddhism to the local society that it lands in. So with that in mind, we propose that at Guangshan temples such as Nantian, there is, for want of a better term, what we call an integrative spatial practice. So that means that for some religious groups, they may have the tendency to segregate the space or time that is dedicated to the devotees and the visitors, the casual visitors. But in this case, in a lot of events and festivals, for example, at Nantian, you always see people mixing around. So for example, at the Buddha's birthday festival at Nantian Temple, you will see casual visitors that come for the spectacle, for the food, or for the celebration. But you also have the more pious or religious practitioners that came to pray, to do the Buddha bathing ritual that they do every year. But there is also another group. We have, of course, the Venerables, not to be missed, but also our devotees and volunteers that play the role of, manning the stalls, organizing the place, and serving these visitors or devotees from outside. So I thought of calling this an inclusive spatial practice, but that can be problematic because if you say that it's inclusive, people would think, are you including or excluding me? So for want of a better term, that's what we call it. But we also see something quite interesting. So with time, we sort of notice that there are people who engage with the temple and with the Dharma at Nantian Temple in different ways. And we call this a process of role transition. So they might first come as a casual visitor and they get interested and wanted to volunteer or they participate more regularly in the Dharma services and become a devotee, or they become a BLIA member, and so on. So I wanted to explore this a little bit more, but at that time when we wrote the reflective paper, we sort of lacked a grounding in a very specific and defined doctrine in humanistic Buddhism to refer to. And there is also not a lot of data to support these observations, although when we talk to people, we say, oh, we saw that. And yes, I saw that as well. So in this presentation, I try to extend the study in two ways. The first is to link it to a humanistic Buddhist concept that was articulated in the Lamb transmission record, and the second to find data to illustrate how this happens on the ground. So for the first point, I turn to the 4 pillars of the practical implementation of humanistic Buddhism in the Lamb transmission record. We missed the pie chart that shows how people integrate in the role transition model, but we can go straight to slide number 10, which is about the 4 pillars of practical implementation. And here I focus on collective cultivation, which is interesting because it can be part of any of the previous 3, but it also can itself encompass all the other 3 in itself. So the Lamb transmission report presents each of these 4 pillars in 3 points, starting from this in the diagram that you see on the screen, from the formation of this concept by Venerable Master Hsing to the ideas or characteristics of each one of them and how they were implemented in the decades of Dharma propagation at Fo-Guang-Shan. In the next slide, we will be looking at Venerable Master's concept of collective cultivation in humanistic Buddhism. So very briefly, we start from the base. The part on formation in the Lamb transmission record attributes Venerable Master's concept on collective cultivation to 3 things: his personal trait of loving the people and always loving to be with people, his life experience from a young age of always living with the community, and also the alignment of collective cultivation with the Buddhist practice of living with the Sangha. And secondly, in this part in the Lamb transmission record, we see the characteristics of this practice of collective cultivation explicated. So it highlights a few qualities. So first is, by being with the community, you can be mutually reliant on each other and mutually encourage each other's practice. It is also a recognition of the equality of everyone, that we all have the same potential of Buddhahood. And collective cultivation is a means of leading others towards Buddhism, as well as a way to practice the Dharma oneself. So in this case, it does not deny the benefit of private practice, but it extols the merit of collective cultivation by highlighting these characteristics and benefits of practicing with others. And in the third part on this section in the Lamb transmission record, it raises a lot of examples of how this was implemented in Fo-Guang-Shan throughout the decades by Venerable Master mostly, and also by some of the other branches throughout the history of Fo-Guang-Shan of 60 years since its establishment. So in the next slide, I will talk about how we attempted to find data to support this spatial practice and also role transition that we see on the ground. And I realized we were sitting on this treasure trove, the Nantian Temple 30th Anniversary Oral History Project, which was delivered by Senior Education Foundation in partnership with the State Library of New South Wales. And in this project, Venerable Jue Fang, who everyone is familiar with, interviewed 20 key monastic and lay leaders of the community, scholars, longtime devotees, and volunteers. So if I could turn to my notes, we can go to the next slide. So we presented data, we looked at the data from 7 out of these 20 interviewees. And do not bother yourself with reading this table line by line. So it is just to illustrate that the 7 interviewees chosen here, they comprise of mostly lay members. All of them are BLIA members, and in fact, BLIA community leaders by the time they were interviewed. So they are of different age group, but they all came to Australia at around the same time when the temple was established or just starting to develop itself. Most of them are bilingual, and all are migrants except there was one native Australian. Interestingly, although most of the people are bilingual, English is their primary language or their main language. So they are from different cultural background, mostly Chinese from different parts of the world, and there is of course one native Australian here. So the next slide will show some of the things that we look at. So because again, don't bother you with the text on this table, but this is just to illustrate what are the themes we try to find when we look into this data. So firstly, we look at the significant conditions that brought them to the temple and enabled them to stay for the long term in the temple. So there were multiple factors. A lot of them have a very devout family member that could be a spouse or the parent. And other significant conditions include being close to a venerable, a certain venerable in the temple, or just a very immediate sense of belonging as they come into the temple. And interestingly, for the Australian native, a pilgrimage to Taiwan and a close encounter with the master was one of the significant conditions of her affiliating herself with the temple. So the second part of this table illustrates some of the roles that they have gone throughout the years. And as you can see there, they start with being a casual visitor, some to be as a volunteer, and then later on becoming a BLIA member, committee member, some of them president, elder advisor, and so on in different capacities. Some of them also use their professional skill to volunteer in a very specialist oriented way for the temple. So in the next slide. Okay, so this line here, sorry, if you could go back to the last slide. There was this line here at the very bottom where we tried to look at the different practice that they engage in, because somehow there was this impression that everyone at Fo Guangshan does chanting practice. But actually through this kind of oral history, we can find that if you could click to show the last line, some of the people here, they prefer to engage in textual study. Some of them prefer to meditate, and some of them do engage in chanting. So the next slide is a summary of the different findings of this analysis. So firstly, for them to be engaged, a notable person is important. It can be a Dharma friend in the form of a family member, a venerable, or arguably the Venerable Master himself. Affinity with the Venerable Master does not have to be a personal encounter. It can be through his words and Dharma works, and that is probably quite important as an observation for ourselves moving forward after the Venerable Master's passing. A strong sense of belonging was quoted as an important factor for 2 out of the 7 interviewees. However, there are some common points looking at all 7. So each of them in their interview did say that they benefit from the Dharma in various ways. And for all of them, volunteering was part of their path in this role transition model. And of course, as mentioned, every one of the interviewee was a BLI member or community member. Factors, there is a variety. If we could go down to the next slide. So this shows that for all of them on their path as a volunteer, there were different occasions of collective cultivation that enabled them to move on along this path of their engagement with the organization and also with the Dharma. And the last part of my presentation is just some excerpts on some of the themes that we look at. And I might just go to the next slide after this. So we look at resonance with the teaching. We look at the theme of belonging. But in the last slide, it is on their view of how they engage with the temple, which is slide number 19. Thank you, Michael. So interviewee Q say that even some of the volunteers that has come through would tell you, oh, I've actually participated in this particular event, and that's why it made me interested in coming. I think for all of us, that's how we encountered the temple. In fact, and that's how I encountered the temple is through events as well, which I think sort of verify our hypothesis that there is this process of role transition through integrative spatial practice happening in the temple. And I think my next slide is a conclusion slide. And I think the process of looking at this kind of data sort of reveals some of the things that are actually happening on the ground, and offer some food for thought in how we continue to sustain and grow a Buddhist community after the initial phase of placemaking. And in the process, not only transmit the lamp onward in a linear manner, but also hopefully spread the light more broadly. And I would like to acknowledge the that provide the interview data and all the interviewees who very generously shared their story. Some of them are in the room, and their story are public on the website of Nantian Temple. Sorry for going over time. It's okay.
Thank you so much. I think your presentation is very helpful for understanding Buddhist communities. Now it's time for questions. Please feel free to raise your questions to our speakers now.
Just a question to Shou-Jen. Thank you for your presentation. My question was, did the community build organically by themselves, or was there some active agents involved in this community building? And second follow-up question will be, what do you find will be the important thing in a community for a community building to be possible according to the transmission, transmission?
Thank you, Stacy, for asking that question. Actually, so that is probably into years, because although on one hand, the community does grow organically, but it also grows in a very structured way. And as we know, there are a lot of structured way of collective cultivation that are implemented in Fo-Guang-Shan and BLIA. And I guess in that case, you can say that there is the doctrinal foundation that guide this collective cultivation to allow the process of community building to happen, not in a totally organic way, but in a way that is guided by the Dharma, or in other words, you can say that it is the compassion and skillful means of the Venerable Master that allow a lot of practice to build our community.
Like a skillful means. So.
Yeah, I think I would call it that.
Thank you.
Thank you for this. And other questions? Please.
I have a question to Wei-Xian. Because you mentioned two parts in your presentation. The first part is about the structure of the book. And the second, you switch to about the book is functioning for the anchor, the transmission within the monastic community, right? I don't really thank you.
Okay. Actually, there's no very close link between the two parts. The first part is just an introduction to the audience, so that the people who are not familiar with the content of the book set, they can just grasp the basic idea of the books. But the weak link, maybe we should know the true community. That means the deity and the sangha. And what I want to emphasize is that the production, the text production, is also meaningful as to the Sangha group. So if you don't have the whole pictures of the book's content, so you will not know what does it mean. Maybe you will think about this is only for the Sangha community, and that we will focus only on the content of the books. So we are sociologists. We are prefer to look how does the book has impact on the different kinds of community. So yes, that's it's not a very legitimate answer, but I think this is my basic idea for this presentation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And questions to other speakers? Oh, please.
Yeah, I have a question for Jack. Love your presentation. This kind of blurring between hagiography and history, and that the writers performing these or making these texts didn't see themselves as writing hagiography. They were writing history as they perceived it, and all the kind of institutional, everything downstream of those works. We read now with a very modern critical lens. How do you see scholars, especially in that kind of very critical tradition, taking a hagiography as that kind of lived history? And how do you communicate that with them?
Thank you so much, Joseph, for your question. That's an excellent question, right? How can we think about hagiography? And you're absolutely right? The idea of hagiography is a term that's commonly used by academics and scholars of religion to think about biographical works of like saints or important eminent monks, and of course of religious figures. And this is often used in some ways, I would say, to some extent, a kind of a negative connotation in which that critics and scholars will claim that such kind of sources, in a sense, are kind of biased, in the sense that present a figure in a kind of a very kind of a negative, in a way to celebrate their kind of life and contribution. So on the one hand, I think that scholars have talked about such texts in a kind of a negative, with a negative connotation. But I think on the other hand, scholars have also relied on hagiography as very important historical sources, right? To think about the life of important eminent monks and saints throughout history. And of course, those texts are the kind of texts that scholars of religions use right across different religious traditions, right? Not only in Buddhist studies, but also scholars of Christianity, Islam, or even Judaism have relied on the kind of hagiographical texts that study the lived history of religious tradition. So I think, in other words, to think about hagiography as kind of historical sources, historians have to read, in a sense, to read the text in a critical manner. And of course, some historians call it reading across the grains, right? To think about how you can use such kind of sources as historical sources. Yet at the same time, we need to be in a way aware of the kind of bias, the kind of stories, kind of writing traditions that go into the production of this kind of text. So I think it's important a way to balance the two. But I think as a historian, I would say that this kind of sources are extremely important to understand the kind of lived tradition, but also to think about the kind of history and development of a religious tradition. And of course, in the case, to think about the history and development of humanistic Buddhism in this context.
Thank you. Here, please.
I have a question to Professor Yi, but I have to apologize. As I mentioned before, my English is not good enough for the Buddhist philosophy. But I think it's quite interesting you mentioned about the Bo. And you seem to try to apply to the principle of Bo to this kind of separation between Dharma and humanity, if I'm not mistaken. And it let me think about my little research about the Photogenic. If you visit the museum, recently there's some interesting article about whether it's a temple or something. According to my research, the Master Hsing is amazing. It mixed together, and they know the future. If you only focus on temple, people may not come. But if you that temple become a museum. Sometimes it's not really good. So I really find some principle born in the museum. This is my appreciation to your paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Comment is no question. Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you.
So is there any question from online participants? I can't see any for now.
No, I don't.
Okay, so other questions? We still have 5 minutes.
Maybe if I may, I would like to maybe follow up on Professor Chi's presentation. And I think what Professor Chi has just shared with us actually opens up new directions for thinking about how to study the land transmission record. And I think a way to think about is to look at how Buddhists responded to this text. And I think for sociologists, I think maybe what scholars will be interested in is to look at both quantitative and qualitative kind of accounts of both Buddhists and non-Buddhists reading and responding to the text. And also, I think as you mentioned, to think about this idea of Master Hsing's charisma, right? How do they interpret the charisma after his passing through the interpretation by looking at this text? I think that will be very interesting kind of new research.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Can we please put our hands together for our facilitator and all the presenters in this panel? This concludes day 1 of the symposium. If your questions have not been answered, please be assured that we can continue the discussion during our closing conversation tomorrow afternoon. Thank you everyone for your focused attention. Can we please our presenters, wonderful presenters and facilitators? The symposium will continue at 1:30 p.m. tomorrow, Australian Eastern Standard Time, in the same room and using the same Zoom link for those online. We welcome our online participants to please log in at least 5 minutes prior. We will leave this room open for a few more minutes. You are also welcome to join our Sunday check-in session tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Venerable Miao Guang will facilitate our reflections over a body light cell. Separate registration is required. So please use a separate registration to attend tomorrow morning's communities of practice by Venerable Miao Guang. You're welcome to leave your reflection in the Zoom chat while I continue with a few more announcements that relate to us on site. Thank you very much for your online attention, and we look forward to seeing you back tomorrow. For everyone on site, please post your reflection from today on the board outside. If you have not already, please pick up our hot off the press copy of the English Lamp transmission record of Humanistic Buddhism by Venerable Master Hsing. We thank Venerable Miao Guang and her team for carrying these books across the ocean to us. And tonight, dinner will be served at 6 p.m. in the Ganda Hall where you had lunch today. A brief note on the program for tomorrow. Breakfast will be served at Ganda Hall at 7:30 a.m. For those who would like to join morning chanting, it's at 6:20 a.m. in the main shrine. At 9:30 a.m., please return to this room for closed-door, invitation-only roundtable discussion on the next steps for the lamp transmission record. The public program will resume at 11 a.m. with the communities of practice Sunday check-in session that I have just announced. Thank you for your attention and contributions today, everyone. We wish you a very good evening.
Thank you.
Doing good job.